Texas Central style. German and Czech butchers in the 1800s created Central Texas BBQ when they began smoking unsold beef brisket in brick pits behind their meat markets, transforming a tough, cheap cut into the state's most iconic dish. The style emphasizes meat over sauce. Traditional Central Texas joints serve brisket with no sauce at all, believing that proper smoking for 12 to 16 hours over post oak creates flavor complex enough that sauce is unnecessary or even insulting. The brisket is rubbed with nothing but coarse black pepper and salt, a mixture Texans call Dalmatian rub because it looks like the spotted dog. Pitmaster Aaron Franklin in Austin smokes briskets at 275 degrees Fahrenheit until the internal temperature reaches exactly 203 degrees Fahrenheit, a precise target where collagen transforms into gelatin and the meat becomes tender enough to pull apart with your fingers. A whole packer brisket weighs 12 to 18 pounds before cooking and loses 40% of its weight during smoking as fat and moisture drip away. The fat cap on top bastes the meat during cooking, and the point end becomes so rich and fatty that it's considered a delicacy. The famous smoke ring, the pink layer just beneath the bark, comes from nitrogen dioxide and smoke reacting with myoglobin in meat, creating a color change that has nothing to do with how well the meat is cooked. Lines at Franklin Barbecue start at 7 a.m. for an 11 a.m. opening, with brisket selling out by 1 p.m. despite cooking 1,200 pounds daily. Kansas City style. This metropolitan BBQ style developed in the early 1900s when Henry Perry, a Tennessee pitmaster, opened a restaurant in Kansas City serving slow-smoked meats to black workers in the garment district. Kansas City BBQ distinguishes itself by smoking everything: brisket, ribs, pulled pork, chicken, sausage, and even turkey, rather than specializing in one meat like regional styles. The sauce is thick, sweet, and tomato-based with molasses, brown sugar, and vinegar, creating a glossy coating that caramelizes on the meat surface. Arthur Bryant took over Perry's restaurant in 1946 and created the sauce that would define Kansas City BBQ, thicker and sweeter than Carolina vinegar sauces, with enough body to cling to meat without dripping off. The city claims over 100 barbecue restaurants, more per capita than any American city, and hosts the American Royal World Series of Barbecue, attracting 500 teams competing for prize money. Kansas City burnt ends, the fatty point of brisket cut into cubes, re-smoked, and tossed in sauce, were originally given away free as scraps until demand made them menu items costing more than regular brisket. The style uses hickory and oak wood exclusively, never mesquite, which Texans prefer, claiming it creates cleaner smoke flavor. Memphis style. Memphis BBQ focuses obsessively on pork ribs prepared two ways: wet ribs brushed with sauce during the last hour of smoking, or dry ribs coated only in spice rub without sauce touching them until serving. The dry rub contains 10 to 15 spices including paprika, garlic powder, black pepper, and cayenne, creating a crusty coating called bark that's crunchy and intensely flavored. Memphis pitmasters argue that sauce masks meat quality and proper smoking shouldn't require it. The best joints offer sauce on the side as optional condiment rather than integral component. The city's BBQ tradition traces to the 1920s when Charlie Vergos opened the Rendezvous downtown, serving ribs to lunch crowds from his basement restaurant. Memphis ribs are typically baby back ribs from the loin section, rather than spare ribs from the belly. Baby backs are smaller, more tender, and cook faster. The ribs smoke for 3 to 4 hours at 225 degrees Fahrenheit to 250 degrees Fahrenheit over hickory or hickory apple wood blends. Memphis also specializes in pulled pork shoulder served on white bread with coleslaw piled on top, creating sandwiches that are messy, drippy, and meant to be eaten with plenty of napkins. The sauce, when used, is thin and tangy with vinegar and tomato base, but much less sweet than Kansas City sauce. Eastern North Carolina style. The oldest American BBQ style slow smokes whole hogs for 12 to 24 hours over hickory or oak coals in cinder block pits, basting them with a mop sauce of vinegar, red pepper flakes, and sometimes a little sugar. After smoking, the entire hog, from shoulder to ham, is chopped together with a cleaver on a wooden block, mixing the various textures and fat contents into a single pile. The chopped meat is dressed with a clear vinegar-based sauce containing no tomato, no sugar, and no thickness, just vinegar, red pepper, black pepper, and salt, creating a sharp, spicy liquid that cuts through the pork's richness. The whole hog tradition means Eastern Carolina BBQ contains every part of the pig in each serving, creating complex texture as lean shoulder meat mixes with fatty belly and rich jowls. Traditional restaurants serve it on a hamburger bun with finely chopped coleslaw mixed with the same vinegar sauce, creating a complete meal on bread. The vinegar sauce's origins trace to the Caribbean, brought to coastal Carolina by enslaved Africans who used similar preparations for goat and pork. Some old-line BBQ families have maintained continuous pits for over 100 years, never letting their fires go completely cold. They claim seasoned pits produce better flavor than new pits. Lexington style. Also called Western North Carolina or Piedmont style, this BBQ variant emerged in the 1920s when German immigrants in Lexington began adding ketchup to the traditional vinegar sauce and smoking pork shoulder exclusively rather than whole hog. The sauce, called dip locally, combines ketchup, vinegar, brown sugar, and red pepper into a thin, tangy sweet liquid that's red instead of Eastern Carolina's clear sauce. The pork shoulder is smoked for 10 to 14 hours, then chopped or pulled and mixed with the red sauce before serving. Lexington BBQ comes with red slaw, coleslaw dressed with the same red sauce instead of mayonnaise, creating a unified flavor profile across the entire plate. The town of Lexington, population 20,000, contains over 20 barbecue restaurants, earning it the title Barbecue Capital of the World, and hosting an annual barbecue festival that draws 100,000 visitors. The most famous restaurant, Lexington Barbecue, has been owned by the same family since 1962 and still uses wood-fired pits rather than gas or electric smokers. The style uses only hickory wood, never oak or fruit woods, and cooks at slightly higher temperatures than Eastern Carolina, around 275 degrees Fahrenheit to 300 degrees Fahrenheit versus 225 degrees Fahrenheit to 250 degrees Fahrenheit, creating darker bark and slightly drier texture. South Carolina mustard style. The only American BBQ style using mustard-based sauce emerged from South Carolina's large German immigrant population in the 1700s, who brought their love of mustard and adapted it to smoked pork. The sauce combines yellow mustard, vinegar, brown sugar, and spices into a tangy, sweet, pungent mixture called Carolina Gold that tastes completely unlike any other BBQ sauce. The mustard creates a bright yellow color that looks strange to first-timers expecting red or brown sauce. Whole hog smoking remains traditional, though pulled pork shoulder is increasingly common. The meat is dressed generously with mustard sauce, creating a flavor profile that divides people sharply. Mustard lovers become devoted, while others find it overwhelming. South Carolina actually has 4 distinct sauce regions: mustard-based in the central area around Columbia, vinegar-based near the North Carolina border, tomato-based in the western mountains, and a mixture of all three near Charleston. This sauce diversity within one state is unique in American BBQ. The mustard sauce tradition nearly died out in the 1960s when national BBQ chains popularized thick tomato sauces, but local restaurants preserved it as a regional identity. The sauce pairs particularly well with pork's fattiness. The mustard's sharpness cuts through rich meat in ways vinegar or tomato sauces can't replicate. Alabama white sauce. This mayo-based sauce from northern Alabama is the most unusual BBQ sauce in America, created in 1925 by Bob Gibson at his Decatur restaurant. The sauce combines mayonnaise, vinegar, lemon juice, black pepper, and horseradish into a thick white condiment that looks like ranch dressing but tastes sharply tangy with powerful horseradish bite. It's used exclusively on chicken. Pitmasters mop it on during the final minutes of smoking and serve extra on the side, and pairing it with pork or beef is considered heresy. The sauce was Bob Gibson's accidental creation when he ran out of traditional BBQ sauce during a busy shift and improvised with available ingredients. The mayonnaise base creates a creamy coating that caramelizes slightly during smoking, creating crispy, flavorful skin on the chicken. Alabama white sauce remained virtually unknown outside North Alabama until the 2010s when BBQ competition circuits discovered it and spread it nationwide. The sauce must be kept cold until service and can't be used during early smoking stages because mayonnaise separates and curdles under high heat. Traditional white sauce contains no sugar whatsoever, relying on vinegar's acidity and horseradish's heat to complement smoky chicken. Some modern versions add sugar or honey, creating sweeter sauce that purists reject as inauthentic. The sauce has spawned regional variations. Some restaurants add cayenne pepper for heat, others incorporate buttermilk for tanginess, and a few radical pitmasters use it on pork despite traditional prohibitions. St. Louis style. This urban barbecue style centers on pork spare ribs trimmed into neat rectangles called St. Louis cut, removing the rib tips and brisket bone to create uniform racks that cook evenly. The trimming creates ribs that look cleaner and more presentable than untrimmed spare ribs, though the removed scraps, called rib tips, are sold separately as a beloved local specialty. St. Louis ribs smoke for 4 to 6 hours at 225 degrees Fahrenheit to 250 degrees Fahrenheit until they achieve perfect tenderness. The bend test checks doneness by holding one end of the rack and watching it bend. Proper ribs droop significantly but don't fall apart. The sauce is tomato-based and moderately sweet, thinner than Kansas City sauce but thicker than Memphis sauce containing vinegar, brown sugar, molasses, and spices. St. Louis barbecue traces to the 1930s when the city's stockyards processed millions of hogs, and creative cooks turned scraps into smoked specialties. The style uses predominantly hickory wood, with occasional additions of apple or cherry wood for subtle fruit notes. Ribs are served wet, brushed with sauce during the final 30 minutes of cooking, creating sticky, caramelized exterior. The city's most famous BBQ restaurants are in Solar, a neighborhood near the old stockyards where German immigrants settled. St. Louis-style barbecue includes unique side dishes like macaroni and cheese, thick-cut fries, and white bread, served alongside the ribs on disposable trays lined with red checkered paper. Kentucky mutton. Western Kentucky's BBQ scene specializes in smoked mutton, meat from sheep older than 1 year, creating an intensely gamey flavor that natives love and outsiders often find overpowering. The tradition dates to the 1830s when Welsh sheep farmers settled the region, bringing their sheep-raising expertise and taste for mutton. The meat is smoked for 8 to 12 hours over hickory coals until falling off the bone tender, then chopped and served with a thin, acidic sauce called dip that's heavy on Worcestershire sauce and black pepper. Fresh mutton has such strong flavor that it requires no spice rub beyond salt. The smoking and sauce provide all necessary seasoning. Owensboro, Kentucky holds an international BBQ festival annually that's been running since 1979, serving over 10,000 pounds of mutton to 20,000 visitors. The meat comes from mature sheep that would otherwise have little commercial value since Americans rarely eat lamb and almost never eat mutton. Each animal yields about 40 pounds of usable meat. The flavor is polarizing. People either love it intensely or can't tolerate a single bite. Restaurants serve mutton alongside burgoo, a thick stew containing mutton, vegetables, and multiple other meats. The practice of smoking mutton exists almost nowhere else in America, making Kentucky's preservation of this tradition remarkable. Santa Maria style. This Central California BBQ focuses on tri-tip, a triangular cut from the bottom sirloin, seasoned with only salt, black pepper, and garlic salt, then grilled over local red oak coals. The simplicity is deliberate. Pitmasters want the beef's flavor to dominate without heavy rubs or sauces masking it. The meat is grilled rather than smoked, cooking for 45 to 60 minutes over direct heat from red oak burned down to coals. The tri-tip is served sliced against the grain, revealing a perfect pink interior with a dark, crusty exterior. Traditional Santa Maria BBQ accompanies the tri-tip with pinquito beans, a small pink bean grown only in the Santa Maria Valley, garlic bread, and green salad. The tradition dates to the 1800s when Spanish rancheros hosted celebrations, roasting beef over open fires for local communities. The cooking method uses adjustable grills that raise or lower over the coals, controlling heat without moving the meat, a technique different from fixed-height grills. Red oak grows throughout California's coastal ranges and produces mild smoke that enhances beef without overwhelming it like mesquite would. Santa Maria-style barbecue remained relatively unknown outside California until the 1990s when food writers discovered it and spread its reputation nationally. Tri-tip costs $8 to $12 per pound, far cheaper than premium cuts like ribeye, but when cooked properly, it's nearly as tender and flavorful. Carolina pork shoulder. Western North Carolina's Lexington style focuses exclusively on pork shoulder, also called pork butt or Boston butt. Despite coming from the shoulder, smoked for 10 to 16 hours until it reaches 195 degrees Fahrenheit to 205 degrees Fahrenheit internal temperature. At these temperatures, collagen breaks down into gelatin and fat renders completely, creating meat so tender it pulls apart without effort. The shoulder is served chopped or pulled, dressed in red sauce made from ketchup, vinegar, sugar, and red pepper flakes. The chopping technique differs between restaurants. Coarse chopping leaves chunks the size of quarters, while fine chopping creates shredded meat, almost paste-like in texture. Lexington restaurants serve their BBQ on hamburger buns with red slaw piled on top, creating sandwiches with multiple textures and the vinegar ketchup sauce soaking into the bread. A single pork shoulder weighs 14 to 18 pounds before cooking and feeds 20 to 25 people after smoking and pulling. The meat's fat content Around 20% to 25% is crucial for moisture and flavor during long smoking. Some pitmasters inject shoulders with apple juice or vinegar solutions before smoking, adding moisture that helps the meat stay juicy during extended cooking times. The money muscle, a specific cylindrical section of the shoulder blade, is considered the best meat on the shoulder with optimal tenderness and flavor. Memphis dry ribs. Memphis pitmasters coat pork ribs in elaborate dry rubs containing 12 to 18 spices, then smoke them for 4 to 5 hours without ever applying sauce, creating intensely flavored bark that's crusty, slightly gritty, and packed with spice complexity. The rubs typically contain paprika, brown sugar, garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper, cayenne, cumin, mustard powder, and proprietary secret ingredients each pitmaster guards jealously. Charlie Vergos at Rendezvous Restaurant popularized dry ribs in the 1940s, serving them in his basement restaurant that's still operating today with lines stretching around the block. The ribs are technically not true BBQ by purist standards because they're cooked over charcoal grills at higher temperatures, 300 degrees Fahrenheit to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, rather than low and slow smoking at 225 degrees Fahrenheit, completing in 2 to 3 hours instead of 6 to 8 hours. This faster cooking creates different texture, less fall off the bone tender, more toothsome with slight resistance. Memphis ribs should pass the bend test. Held from one end, the rack should bend, and the meat should crack slightly on the surface but not fall off the bone, which indicates overcooking. The dry ribs are served with sauce on the side, letting diners choose whether to add it, though purists eat them unsauced to taste the full spice rub flavor. The ribs are cut St. Louis style or served as whole spare ribs depending on the restaurant, with fierce debates about which cut is superior. Eastern North Carolina whole hog. This ancient BBQ style involves butterflying an entire 180 to 200 pound pig, spreading it flat skin side up over a pit filled with burning hardwood coals and smoking it for 12 to 18 hours while basting with a mop sauce of vinegar, red pepper, and sometimes sugar. The whole hog tradition means every part of the animal cooks together: lean shoulder, fatty belly, tender loin, rich jowls, creating complex texture when chopped together after smoking. Traditional pits are cinder block rectangles built directly into the ground or constructed above ground with metal grates, tended constantly through the night as pitmasters shovel fresh coals underneath and baste the pig every 30 to 60 minutes. The skin crisps and renders, basking the meat below in pork fat while the smoke penetrates from below. After smoking, the entire pig is chopped on a wooden block using cleavers, mixing all the meat together into a pile that's dressed with the same vinegar pepper sauce used for mopping. Eastern Carolina BBQ has no other acceptable form. Serving pork shoulder instead of whole hog or using tomato-based sauce instead of vinegar marks you as an outsider or heretic. The chopped pork is served on hamburger buns or as plates with coleslaw, hush puppies, and boiled potatoes. Some legendary pit houses have operated continuously since the 1830s, with family recipes and techniques passed down through 6 or 7 generations. South Carolina mustard belt. The Midlands region around Columbia, South Carolina developed the only American BBQ sauce built on mustard, combining yellow mustard with vinegar, brown sugar, and spices into a tangy, pungent sauce called Carolina Gold that's bright yellow and looks bizarre to outsiders. The mustard base came from German settlers in the 1700s who brought their culinary traditions to South Carolina and adapted them to local smoked pork. Whole hogs are smoked low and slow, then pulled and dressed heavily in the yellow sauce, creating BBQ that tastes sharply tangy with vinegar, bite balanced by mustard's savory depth. The sauce is polarizing. People either love its unique profile or hate it viscerally with no middle ground. First-time tasters often compare it to eating hot dog mustard on smoked meat, which sounds unappealing until you try it and realize the smoking transforms the flavor completely. The mustard sauce region occupies only the central part of South Carolina. Travel 50 miles east and you encounter vinegar sauces, 50 miles west brings tomato-based sauces, creating remarkable diversity within one state. Maurice's Piggy Park, opened in 1953, claims to have invented Carolina Gold, though other restaurants dispute this and say the sauce existed decades earlier. The sauce has gained national attention in recent years as BBQ competitions feature it and specialty food stores stock it alongside traditional red sauces. Alabama white sauce chicken. Big Bob Gibson, BBQ in Decatur. Alabama invented white sauce in 1925, creating the only mayo-based BBQ sauce in America that's gained regional significance. The sauce combines mayonnaise, apple cider vinegar, lemon juice, horseradish, black pepper, and salt into a thick, creamy condiment used exclusively on smoked chicken. The chicken is smoked for 2 to 3 hours until the skin crisps, then dunked completely in white sauce just before serving. The sauce coats every surface and pools and crevices, The mayonnaise caramelizes slightly on the hot chicken, creating flavors reminiscent of garlic aioli but with powerful horseradish kick. White sauce chicken must be served immediately because the mayonnaise doesn't hold well. Letting it sit causes the sauce to separate and look unappetizing. The sauce remained virtually unknown outside North Alabama until 2011, when Big Bob Gibson's won the World Championship of BBQ, suddenly exposing the white sauce to national BBQ communities. Some Alabama restaurants now put white sauce on pork or turkey, though traditionalists insist it belongs only on chicken. The sauce requires refrigeration and lasts only 5 to 7 days because mayonnaise spoils quickly, unlike vinegar or tomato sauces that keep for weeks. Making it requires emulsifying the mayonnaise base with acidic ingredients slowly to prevent breaking. Dumping everything together creates separated, oily sauce instead of creamy consistency. Texas East Style. East Texas BBQ reflects Southern influence with both pork and beef on menus, served chopped or sliced on white bread, with thick, sweet tomato-based sauce that's dark red and molasses-heavy. The style developed in the late 1800s when newly freed enslaved people settled in East Texas, bringing BBQ traditions from the Deep South and adapting them to Texas's beef availability. The sauce resembles Kansas City sauce more than Central Texas's minimalist approach, and meat is typically chopped rather than sliced, mixed with sauce before serving rather than sauced at the table. East Texas pitmasters smoke over hickory wood instead of Central Texas's post oak, creating different smoke flavor. Hickory produces sweeter, more bacon-like smoke, while post oak creates cleaner, more neutral smoke. The BBQ joints are often humble wooden shacks with smoke pouring from brick chimneys, serving meat on butcher paper with minimal sides. Beef ribs, massive bones with meat that can measure 8 inches long, are an East Texas specialty, smoked for 6 to 8 hours until the meat pulls away from the bone cleanly. The style emphasizes accessibility and abundance over refinement. Plates are piled high with meat, sauce, and white bread for mopping up drippings. Some East Texas restaurants serve hot guts, spicy beef sausages, as an appetizer while customers wait for smoked meats. West Texas cowboy style. The ranch country of West Texas developed direct heat grilling over mesquite coals rather than low and slow smoking, creating BBQ that cooks in 1 to 2 hours instead of all day. Mesquite burns extremely hot and produces strong, almost harsh smoke that would overpower meat during long smoking, but works perfectly for faster cooking. The style includes goat and mutton alongside beef, reflecting the ranching economy where cattle, sheep, and goats all graze the sparse grasslands. The meat is seasoned simply with salt and pepper, grilled over intense heat to create heavy char on the exterior, while keeping the interior medium rare to medium. Cowboy-style BBQ is served without sauce. The tradition holds that properly grilled meat needs nothing beyond salt, pepper, and smoke. The cooking happens on simple grates suspended over fire pits filled with mesquite coals, often outdoors at ranch gatherings rather than in restaurants. Cabrito, young goat, is grilled whole on spits or cut into quarters and placed directly on grates, cooking for 2 to 3 hours while being turned periodically. The meat tastes gamier than beef or pork with a distinct flavor that divides diners. West Texas BBQ represents the most primitive American BBQ style with the fewest ingredients, least equipment, and simplest techniques. It's essentially fire roasting rather than smoking, though Texans insist it qualifies as BBQ because mesquite smoke flavors the meat. South Texas barbacoa. This style traces directly to pre-Columbian Mexico and arrived in Texas in the 1500s when Spanish conquistadors encountered indigenous peoples steaming meat wrapped in maguey leaves in underground pits. Traditional barbacoa uses an entire cow's head wrapped in banana or agave leaves, placed in a pit lined with hot coals and covered with earth, then steamed for 8 to 12 hours underground. The technique cooks the meat through indirect heat and steam rather than smoke, creating fall-apart tenderness and rich, beefy flavor. The cheek meat, called cachet, is considered the finest part. It's so tender and fatty it melts on the tongue. The tongue is served separately, sliced thin with its distinctive texture. The brain, eyes, and other parts are traditionally consumed by the family hosting the barbacoa, while the chopped meat is served to guests in tacos with cilantro, onions, and salsa. Health regulations in most Texas cities now prohibit underground cooking, forcing restaurants to use above-ground smokers or steam ovens that approximate barbacoa's texture without traditional pit cooking. Authentic barbacoa is now found mainly at home gatherings or rural areas where regulations are less strict. The meat is served early morning. Many barbacoa specialists sell out by 10 a.m. on weekends. As a traditional breakfast or brunch food, the underground cooking method creates meat so tender it's almost liquid, completely different from traditional smoked BBQ's firmer texture and smoke flavor. Kansas City burnt ends. Originally given away free as scraps from brisket's fatty point end, burnt ends became so popular that Kansas City restaurants now charge more for them than regular brisket slices. The point is separated from the brisket's flat section after initial smoking, cut into 1-inch cubes, tossed in sauce, and returned to the smoker for 2 to 3 more hours until the exterior caramelizes into crispy, almost candy-like coating. Each cube contains a mix of meat and rendered fat, creating richness that's almost overwhelming. Eating more than 3 to 4 cubes leaves most people feeling stuffed. The twice cooking process creates bark so thick and sweet it crunches when bitten, giving way to fatty interior that melts instantly. Arthur Bryant's BBQ in Kansas City perfected burnt ends in the 1950s, though the technique probably existed earlier without formal recognition. A single brisket's point yields only 2 to 3 pounds of burnt ends versus 8 to 10 pounds from the flat section, creating scarcity that drives prices to $25 to $30 per pound. Some restaurants make poor man's burnt ends from pork belly or chuck roast, cutting them into cubes and cooking them identically. They're delicious, but purists insist real burnt ends come only from brisket point. The cubes should glisten with rendered fat and sauce, leaving your fingers sticky and requiring multiple napkins per serving.